The hallway felt tight. Maybe I imagined it, but Mark seemed to crowd me as I passed. Always so clueless. I caught a whiff of something sweet on his neck. Something that definitely wasn't mine. That stupid rose soap I keep in the guest bathroom? Whatever. I had bigger things on my mind. Those theater tickets in my purse were burning a hole in my conscience. Another 2 weeks before the show, and Mark, stupid, oblivious man, still hadn't noticed. The tickets were for Emily and me, a way to get out of town for the night. He wouldn't ask, wouldn't think twice. It was stupid how easy this was. Emily's text popped up, a laughing emoji and 3 hearts. God, I loved her. My fingers flew across the keyboard, a flirty little comment that'd make her grin. If I couldn't be bold with her, what was the point? The guilt jabbed at me, but who was I kidding? This was way past a guilty crush. The butterflies in my stomach whenever I saw her name on my screen. That wasn't normal friendship stuff. Then it hit me, that damn credit card statement. We're not exactly rolling in money, and that little inn in Emily's town wasn't cheap. Weekend getaway, my ass. Mark was bound to see that charge. Sweat prickled my neck. I'd lied about something work-related, thrown together some excuse about a conference. I'd have to come up with a better story, fast. Maybe a last-minute girls' trip with my old college buddies. Yeah, that could work. If only it didn't feel like one giant lie layered on top of another. I couldn't do this to Mark forever. The sneaking around, the constant fear of getting caught. It was exhausting. But the thought of stopping, of not seeing Emily, that was unbearable. Emily was my escape. Every giggle, every stolen touch, it was like air after being suffocated for years. Mark used to be fun, but that spark had been gone longer than I cared to admit. I couldn't tell him. Couldn't break his heart. He was decent, I guess. Reliable. But Emily, she made me feel alive. Had to be worth it, right? This kind of passion, this head-over-heels feeling. That was once-in-a-lifetime stuff. The damn phone rang right as I was curling my hair. I scrambled for it, hissing a quick, "Hey babe," into the receiver. Emily's voice crackled on the other end, bright and giggly. "Guess what?" she said, and I could practically see her grin through the phone. Before I could respond, Mark's footsteps headed toward the bathroom. Panic clawed at my throat. Gotta go. I practically squeaked into the phone, slamming it down before Mark walked in. "Just checking in?" he asked. A strange look in his eye. Damn it. Should have gone into the bedroom for privacy. Nah. Just a junk call, I lied, trying to shrug it off. But his eyes were narrowed, suspicious. Did he hear anything? Emily was so damn bubbly, it wasn't like I could hide who I was on the phone with. Mark lingered, and my heart thrummed against my ribs. Was I imagining it, or was that a flash of something? Hurt? Anger? I busied myself with my lipstick, avoiding his gaze. When he finally left, I slumped against the sink. This had to stop. Later that night, as Mark snored beside me, I crept to the bathroom. My hands trembled as I rifled through the drawers. Where was that damn bra? The black lace one Emily had raved about. I swore I tucked it in the back. My fingers closed around it, silky and a little scandalous. A rush of guilt, a thrill of defiance. Damn, it felt good to have something that was mine, just mine. Mark mumbled something in his sleep and rolled over. I froze. God, what would I tell him if he found this? But he didn't, and I slipped the bra into my pajama pocket, a secret burning against my skin. The next few days were a blur of stolen glances and whispered phone calls. Emily and I were supposed to have a regular girls' night with our mutual friends, but something in me was screaming to get away, just the two of us. Hey, babe, I said to Mark one morning, remember how Lisa and the girls wanted to do drinks next week? I'm kinda tired, maybe I'll just stay home. His eyebrows shot up, that look of suspicion back in his eyes. Are you sure? You guys always have fun. Yeah, I'll go next time, I said, forcing a smile. Mark wanted me to be happy, even if he was clueless about why I wasn't anymore. If he only knew. My stomach was a knot of nerves. The rose-scented candle still sat on the bathtub rim, a silent accusation. Mark was getting suspicious, I could feel it. I had to do something to throw him off. One morning, over coffee, I forced a bright smile. Hey, remember that cute bed and breakfast we always said we'd go to? Maybe a little weekend trip? Just us. Mark's brow furrowed. Sure, babe, that kinda came out of nowhere, though. He wasn't buying it. My hands shook as I poured more coffee. I hated lying to him. But if this bought me more time with Emily, a way to play the doting wife for a few days, then it was worth it. The family dinner a few nights later was a disaster waiting to happen. Mom on my left, Mark right across from me, and Emily seated directly in his line of sight. I couldn't eat, my heart pounding every time Emily flashed that smile in my direction. So, Mom chirped, Sarah, how's work been lately? I fumbled for something, anything, to say, but then I felt it, Mark's stare burning a hole through me. Did he know? Could he feel that connection between Emily and me crackling across the table? Across from us, Emily's foot brushed mine under the cover of the tablecloth. A jolt of electricity, a reckless thrill, shot up my leg. That night, as Mark lay beside me, breathing slow and steady, I thought he was asleep. But I made the mistake of glancing at him, and in the moonlight, I saw his eyes were open, staring up at the ceiling. He knew, God, he knew. The next day, he went out for a long run. I knew he always left his phone on the charger. My hand twitched, the temptation almost overwhelming. It wasn't right to go snooping, but this weight of secrecy was crushing me. I tiptoed into the kitchen, my heart in my throat. There it was, plugged in and buzzing with notifications. I snatched it up, thumbs flying. I knew Emily's name would be there, and it was, dozens of texts, full of emojis and sweetness and things I couldn't even bring myself to read. That's when the world went red. It was like a bomb had gone off inside me. All the lies, the sneaking around, it all came crashing down. Hot tears spilled down my face as I read their messages, their plans, their stupid little inside jokes. I wanted to throw up, to scream, to break something. How could she do this? To me? To Mark? My fingers shook as I dropped Mark's phone back on its charger, my whole body trembling. Emily and him. Those texts. I was a fool. Not just a fool, an idiot. Naive. How had I missed how unhappy he was? Or had it been a lie all along, just like me? The rage burned hotter than shame. Mark came back from his run, clueless and unsuspecting, all sweaty smiles. I wanted to throw up, to scream at him, but I didn't. Instead, something cold settled inside me, a twisted determination. If they wanted to play games, I'd show them how it's done. Mark went right back to his oblivious routine, and for a few days, I pretended everything was fine. I cooked his favorite meals. I smiled, all the while I started paying closer attention, following patterns. Noting his schedule, it was frighteningly easy. A flash drive tucked in the back of my underwear drawer. A few careful searches on the computer after he went to sleep, finding places to buy those tiny spy cameras, a burner phone for a number he wouldn't recognize. Then, the hardest part, waiting for the perfect moment. One afternoon he was helping with some yard work, the sun hot on his back. "Hon, could you grab me a lemonade? I'm parched." Maybe my voice sounded a little too sweet. He didn't question it, just patted my butt and grinned as he headed inside. While he was distracted, I slipped the camera into our bedside lamp. No way he'd notice it there, hidden in plain sight. It was like setting a trap, the thrill laced with a strange kind of sickness. That night, as we lay in bed, Mark's snores rumbling next to me, I felt an odd kind of power. I wasn't just his clueless wife anymore. He wouldn't get away with this. A few days later, I couldn't take it anymore. Mark was acting extra cheerful, humming to himself in the kitchen. I cornered him, trying to make it look like I was heartbroken, not furious. "Mark," my voice cracked just the right amount, "I think something's changed. I'm not sure. Are you happy?" He looked up from his coffee, startled. "Of course, babe. Why do you ask?" My smirk felt like acid. "Oh. I don't know. You just. You seem more excited lately. More. Energized." His face went a little pale. "Energized? What are you talking about, Sarah?" The game was on. I found Emily's husband's number through one of those creepy people finder websites you see advertised. It cost way too much money, but the rage burning inside me made it worth it. The guy, Rob, sounded as pathetic as I remembered, whiny, bitter, desperate for someone to blame for his own broken marriage. Perfect. Look, I don't know who this is, I said into the phone, my voice disguised enough. I hoped, but I think you should know some things about your wife, Emily. There was a long pause, then, what kind of things? His voice was all sharp edges. I hinted, just a few little details at first. Nothing outright, just enough to get him interested. The places I'd seen her car parked those late nights, the way she lit up talking about her best friend. His breathing got heavy on the other end of the line. Who the hell is this? He demanded. Just a concerned citizen, I said, hanging up with a click. That was the easy part. My mom was next. Those anonymous envelopes in the mail, filled with snippets of Emily and my texts. The cruelest ones, the ones filled with lust and mockery. My mom was old-fashioned. She wouldn't understand this kind of betrayal. Shame would wash over her, and shame on me would follow soon after. Then came the big one. Those videos from our bedroom camera, the sickening proof sent directly to my work email. All those late nights, working overtime, weren't so believable now, were they? When the whispers started at the office, the snide looks, I almost lost my nerve. But I forced myself to smile, to act like nothing was wrong. Finally, the last nail in the coffin. One of those cheating spouse websites, a detailed, anonymous post about my lying, manipulative wife, and her poor, pathetic best friend. I even posted some of the videos, carefully edited to make me look like the heartbroken husband and Emily the cruel homewrecker. Mark was watching me crumble. My forced smiles faltered. I stopped eating, snapping at him over little things. He was probably thrilled, the perfect victim act falling right into place. I saw a flash of smug satisfaction in his eyes sometimes, and it fueled my rage even hotter. He didn't know what hit him was coming. Soon, everyone would. It was almost laughable how quickly it all fell apart. The whispers at work became outright stares. Emails with those damn videos started circulating faster than I could delete them. My phone buzzed with texts from Mom, a mix of fury and disappointment. A few cowardly friends sent vague messages about being there for me, which I knew meant they were gleefully waiting for the juicy details. Emily was getting it even worse. Her husband, Rob, had gone full-on psycho. He posted screenshots of their texts on her company's Facebook page, ranting about sluts and homewrecker. She got fired, obviously. Then Mark finally decided to make his big move. Cornered me in the kitchen one night, all righteous anger. He slammed a stack of printed-out texts and photos on the counter. Care to explain this, Sarah? His voice was low, deadly. I tried. I sputtered about misunderstandings, about Emily being in a bad place. Mark scoffed, throwing another pile of papers at me. Bank statements showing the fancy hotel stays Emily and I lied about. You disgust me, he said, his words like knives. I knew then that it was over. All the begging and pleading in the world wouldn't change anything. He wouldn't listen, he didn't care. The next few weeks were a blur. Mark moved into the guest room, barely speaking to me except through clipped instructions from his lawyer. I got served with divorce papers in front of my gossiping coworkers, the ultimate humiliation. My whole world crumbled. Emily vanished, probably hiding in shame with whatever was left of her life. Friends who used to laugh at my jokes now sent pitying looks, or worse, nothing at all. Mom wouldn't even return my calls. But the worst of it was Mark. The man I loved, the man I betrayed, he looked at me like I was nothing. Once, I thought I saw a flicker of pity in his eyes, but it vanished just as quickly, replaced by a coldness that chilled me to the bone. I'd made my bed, and now I had to lie in it, alone, surrounded by the wreckage of what was once my life. I spent my days in a haze, answering the lawyer's relentless questions, packing up the parts of my life Mark didn't want, trying to find a cheap apartment in a corner of town I could afford. Emily was a ghost, no calls, no texts, vanished as if she never existed. The isolation was crushing. One night, fueled by cheap wine and desperation, a thought clawed its way into my blurry mind. Mark was obsessed with detail, always had been. Those spy cameras, the burner phone, everything was always so carefully planned. But why, unless? Like a switch had flipped, a horrible clarity washed over me. It wasn't just anger driving Mark, it was calculated revenge. The late-night computer sessions, the strange satisfaction in his eyes, it all clicked. He'd orchestrated this. Every agonizing step. I dug through his desk like a madwoman. Hidden amongst tax files and old receipts was a folder, unmarked. Inside were notes, timelines, screenshots, and a list of websites. The People Finder one, the Infidelity forums, the burner phone receipts were all there. It was like staring at a blueprint for my destruction. A wave of nausea washed over me. I'd been so consumed with my own anger and deceit that I never saw how deep his ran. He wasn't the heartbroken victim, he was the mastermind. The fury that had been simmering turned into a cold, hard dread. The next day, the divorce hearing was brutal. Mark's lawyer presented his evidence, the photos, the texts, painting me as a heartless monster. I sat there, numb, knowing he'd planned it down to the last detail. Even the flicker of smug satisfaction as the judge ruled in his favor felt like a calculated move. Leaving the courthouse, the weight of it all crushed me. I'd been played, outsmarted at my own cruel game. Now, I wasn't just the cheating wife. I was the pathetic, ruined fool. It was a humiliation far worse than I'd ever dished out. Mark had won. But as I walked away, amidst the ashes, a new kind of determination ignited inside me. I wouldn't be his victim anymore. If he wanted a war, I'd make damn sure he would. I remember the buzz of my phone on a lazy Sunday afternoon, the kind of day when you're content with doing absolutely nothing. But that vibration against the coffee table sent a jolt through me, more electrifying than any cup of coffee could. It was Marco, a name I hadn't seen light up my screen in years, but one that still managed to make my heart skip a beat. "Hey, long time no see, remember me?" His message teased, accompanied by a wink emoji. Memories, long buried under the monotony of married life, surged forth like a flood breaking through a dam. We agreed to meet for coffee, just as friends, but who were we kidding? The moment I saw Marco, it was like no time had passed. His smile still had that devil-may-care charm that could disarm me in a heartbeat. As we laughed over memories of our college escapades, he leaned in, his voice dropping to that familiar, enticing whisper. "Let's do something crazy," he suggested, the twinkle in his eye impossible to resist. I found myself nodding before the thought process could even kick in. Just like that, I was on the brink of an affair, convinced that Alex, my husband, too caught up in his world of deadlines and conference calls, wouldn't even notice. That night, as I fabricated a story about needing to stay late at work, the thrill of deception was palpable. Meeting Marco felt like stepping into an alternate reality where I wasn't just the wife, the career woman, the responsible adult. I was someone desirable, someone worth the risk. Our affair spiraled quickly from there, each secret rendezvous more daring than the last, each lie slipping off my tongue a little more easily. Juggling my time between Alex and Marco became a dangerous game I played with precision. I had answers for everything. Working late, sudden business trips, last-minute emergencies. I was playing with fire, but the excitement was too intoxicating to resist. Then came the day Alex came home early, the front door swinging open to reveal his confused face as he called out my name, only to find the house empty. Panic surged through me when I walked in hours later to find him waiting, an unreadable expression on his face. "Work's been crazy," I stammered, hating how my voice trembled. He nodded, seemingly satisfied, but the look in his eyes, a mix of suspicion and hurt, haunted me. I knew I was walking on thin ice, but the pull of my desires, the allure of my secret life with Marco, was too potent to ignore. The affair, once a thrilling escape, had woven itself into the fabric of my daily life, a routine as familiar yet perilous as walking a tightrope. The danger of discovery loomed over us like a dark cloud, but I was too far gone, too entangled in the web of lies I'd spun, to turn back now. The guilt was like a shadow, always trailing just a step behind the thrill. Each time Alex looked at me with those trusting eyes, a pang of something awful twisted in my stomach. I'd brush it off, drown it in the excitement of sneaking around, but it was always there, lurking. It wasn't just the lying that got to me, it was the look in his eyes, the way he still believed in us, in me, even when I was miles away, lost in another's arms. Then Priya saw us. It was supposed to be a quick, inconspicuous lunch with Marco, but there she was, staring at us from across the street. The panic that shot through me was electric, paralyzing. But Priya, with a look that carried 1,000 words, just nodded. Later, she pulled me aside, her voice a mix of concern and disbelief. "I won't tell," she promised, but her disappointment was a weight I wasn't prepared to carry. That secret, now shared, felt heavier, more real. Marco's impatience only added to the pressure. "I want more," he'd say, his demands growing as my ability to juggle the lies began to falter. I was caught in the thrill, the danger, but each demand from Marco was a reminder of the reality I was trying to escape. I brushed off the strain it put on my marriage, convincing myself that Alex's late nights at the office meant he was too distracted to notice, too busy to care. But Alex did notice. One evening, he cornered me with questions about my frequent, overtime, and emergency meetings. His voice was calm, but there was a hardness in his eyes I hadn't seen before. "Is everything okay at work? You've been so distant," he pressed. I countered with assurances, citing stress and deadlines, watching as he nodded, wanting so badly to believe me. Yet, the doubt lingered between us, an uninvited guest that refused to leave. The risk-taking escalated when I lied about a girl's getaway to spend a weekend with Marco. The thrill of being with him, away from all the lies, was intoxicating. We were in our bubble, a world where consequences didn't exist. But they did. A forgotten receipt from that weekend found its way into Alex's hands. It was just a piece of paper, but it might as well have been a grenade, ready to blow my life apart. That receipt was the silent harbinger of a storm I wasn't prepared for, a storm that was about to break over a life built on lies and fleeting moments of stolen happiness. The guilt, the thrill, the denial, all of it was spiraling toward an inevitable end, and I was powerless to stop it. The air between Alex and me had shifted, thick with unspoken accusations and a coldness that crept into our once warm home. His once casual, loving glances turned into scrutinizing, distant stares. The change was subtle at first, a missed dinner here, a forgotten conversation there, but it grew, a mounting wave of suspicion that I couldn't ignore. My own paranoia mirrored his withdrawal. Every phone call he received, every late return home, I wondered if he knew, if the truth was inching closer to shattering our fragile peace. It was Priya who broke first. Her guilt over keeping my secret became too much, her words a desperate plea, "You have to end this. It's not just you and Marco in this story, it's Alex, it's all of us." Her concern was genuine, a stark contrast to the tangled web of lies and deceit I'd woven. I found myself nodding, agreeing to end the affair, but the resolve was weak, my heart torn between the thrill of Marco and the stability of my life with Alex. My indecision haunted me, a constant shadow in my mind. I planned to tell Marco it was over, rehearsing the words, but each meeting ended with me falling deeper into the mess I'd made. It was a cycle of guilt and longing, a loop I couldn't seem to escape. The unexpected came not with a whisper but a storm. Alex, my Alex, had reached his limit, his love turning into a quest for the truth. A private investigator, photographs, messages, a dossier of betrayal laid bare on our kitchen table. The evidence was irrefutable, each picture, each text, a hammer to the life we'd built together. His voice broke the silence, "How could you?" The pain in Alex's eyes, the hurt in his voice, it cut deeper than any accusation. The room spun, a carousel of emotions, as I faced the ruin of our marriage, the destruction of trust. I tried to explain, words tumbling out in a chaotic stream, trying to convey my feelings of neglect, my search for something that made me feel alive again. But the words sounded hollow, even to my ears. The confession changed everything, Alex's anger, his pain, it was a mirror to my guilt, a reflection of the hurt I'd caused. The truth, once a hidden shadow, was now a glaring spotlight on the wreckage of our relationship. The demand for an explanation, my confession, it was the breaking point, a chasm too wide to cross with apologies or promises. The reality of my actions, the consequences of my choices, were laid bare, a foundation of trust shattered beyond repair. The moment Alex walked out the door, the finality of his decision weighed on me like a ton of bricks. His words, "I need some time alone," echoed through the empty spaces of our home, leaving me with nothing but the ghosts of our past and the debris of my actions. I reached for my phone countless times, drafting messages, making calls that went straight to voicemail. Each attempt to bridge the chasm I'd created met with silence, a clear sign that Alex was not ready to hear anything I had to say. In desperation, I turned to Marco, seeking solace, or perhaps a scapegoat for the mess I'd made. But Marco's reaction was a cold splash of reality. "You let us get caught," he spat, his words laced with blame and anger. It was a bitter pill to swallow, realizing that the person I'd risked everything for was now turning his back on me, angered not by the hurt caused, but by the inconvenience of exposure. The fallout was swift. Friends who had once been mutual confidants sided with Alex, their loyalty, unlike mine, unwavering. Invitations dried up, social media became a minefield of indirect jabs and pointed silences. The isolation was suffocating, a constant reminder of the cost of my choices. It was in this solitude that the full weight of my actions settled in. Regret became my constant companion, whispering reminders of what I had thrown away for fleeting moments of excitement. When the legal documents arrived, citing my infidelity as the grounds for divorce, it felt as if the world I knew was officially ending. Alex's decision to formalize our separation with legal proceedings stripped away any lingering hope of reconciliation. The reality of my situation became impossible to ignore, each signature a reminder of the irreversible damage my actions had caused. The divorce process unveiled the extent of my financial dependence on Alex. The house, the car, the comfortable lifestyle, all of it was tied to him, to us. Now, faced with the prospect of starting over, the financial strain was overwhelming. I scrambled to make sense of budgets, legal fees, and living arrangements, a stark contrast to the life I had grown accustomed to. In the midst of legal battles and financial turmoil, I was forced to confront the consequences of my actions head-on. The security and love I had taken for granted were gone, replaced by uncertainty and regret. Alone, with the pieces of my fractured life laid bare, I began to understand the true cost of my choices, a lesson learned too late in the game. The day I left our home for the last time, suitcase in hand and heart heavy, marked the beginning of my new reality. Forced to vacate the life I once cherished, I stepped into an uncertain future, the weight of starting over pressing down on me with each step I took away from the front door. The home that had been a sanctuary was now just a painful reminder of everything I'd lost. The affair, once a secret shared between two, became the talk of the town, spreading like wildfire and igniting whispers of judgment and disdain. Colleagues who once greeted me with warm smiles now offered nothing but cold shoulders. Friends, or those I thought were friends, turned their backs, leaving me to navigate the turbulent waters of public humiliation alone. Marco, the catalyst of my downfall, became another casualty in the aftermath. When confronted with the real-world consequences of our actions, he chose self-preservation, cutting ties with a finality that left me reeling. "I can't do this anymore," he said, his voice devoid of the warmth I had grown accustomed to. Just like that, the fantasy was shattered, leaving me to pick up the pieces of my broken reality. The isolation and loss bore down on me, a relentless force that dragged me into the depths of depression. Days blended into nights, and sleep became my only escape from the relentless cycle of guilt and regret. The world outside became a blur, a distant memory of a life I once knew but could no longer claim as my own. The day the divorce was finalized felt like a mere formality, a legal acknowledgement of the chasm that had long existed between Alex and me. The finality of the judge's decree severed the last tie to the person I once was, leaving me adrift in a sea of uncertainty. Moving day arrived with a stark reminder of my new reality. The small, nondescript apartment I now called home was a far cry from the comfort and security I had taken for granted. Its bare walls and echoing silence were a testament to the choices I'd made, a daily reminder of everything I had lost. To add insult to injury, my job, once a source of pride and independence, became another casualty of my unraveling life. The affair and its fallout had not gone unnoticed by my employers, and my once stellar performance suffered under the weight of my personal turmoil. The day I was let go, the reasons unspoken but clear, marked the loss of the last semblance of normalcy I had clung to. In the wake of everything, I found myself stripped of the life I had known, forced to confront the consequences of my actions. The journey from our shared home to my sparse apartment was not just a physical move but a transition into a new chapter, one marked by loss, learning, and the daunting task of rebuilding from the ground up. The silence of my new, bare apartment was deafening, a stark contrast to the life I once lived, filled with laughter, warmth, and companionship. It was in this solitude that the full weight of my choices crashed down on me, forcing me to confront the pain I'd caused and the ruin I'd made of my own life. The walls, devoid of any personal touch, mirrored the emptiness I felt inside, a constant reminder of the cost of my betrayal. In a moment of desperate clarity, I penned a letter to Alex, pouring out apologies and acknowledging the hurt I'd inflicted. It was an attempt to mend bridges I'd burned, or perhaps a way to ease my own guilt. I dropped the letter in the mail with a heavy heart, hoping for forgiveness I knew I didn't deserve. Days turned into weeks with no reply, a silent confirmation of the irreparable damage I'd done. Facing financial realities, I took the only job I could find, a stark departure from my previous career. The work was mundane, the pay barely enough to cover my bills, but it was a necessary step towards independence, a way to prove to myself that I could start over, no matter how humbling the circumstances. The loneliness was most acute at night, in the quiet hours when the world seemed to pause but my mind raced, replaying my choices and their fallout. I longed for the comfort of my old life, the familiarity and security I'd taken for granted, now lost to me forever. In a weak moment, I reached out to Marco, seeking closure or perhaps a semblance of the connection we once shared. But my attempts were met with silence, a bitter pill that confirmed his betrayal and solidified my isolation. Scrolling through social media one evening, I stumbled upon pictures of Alex, smiling, surrounded by new friends, maybe even a new love. The sight was a knife to my heart, not because he'd moved on, but because I was glad he had. It was a painful yet necessary reminder of the consequences of my actions, a realization that his happiness was no longer intertwined with mine. This realization pushed me to seek support, to find others who understood the complexities of navigating the aftermath of infidelity and divorce. The therapy group I joined became a lifeline, a place where my feelings of guilt, loss, and loneliness were not only understood but shared. It was here, in the company of strangers bound by similar pains, that I found a glimmer of hope, a sense that rebuilding was possible. Each session, each shared story, was a step towards healing, a slow journey towards forgiveness, not from Alex, but from myself. The path was fraught with reminders of what I'd lost, but also with small victories, moments when the burden of guilt lightened just enough to let me breathe, to let me believe in the possibility of a future defined not by my past mistakes but by the lessons they taught me. In the end, the journey through my downfall and the tentative steps towards rebuilding offered a harsh but necessary lesson. Happiness is fragile, trust is precious, and redemption, while possible, comes not from the forgiveness of others but from the hard, often painful work of who knew 5 years could fly by so fast? I mused aloud, staring at the candlelit table my husband, Jake, had set up. It was our 5th anniversary, and he'd gone all out. Candles, roses, my favorite pasta dish. I should have been over the moon, but instead, I felt a knot in my stomach. As he raised his glass, his smile didn't reach his eyes. To us, he toasted, but his voice lacked its usual warmth. I echoed his words, but my mind was elsewhere. Midway through the meal, my phone buzzed. A text from my boss, Mr. Reynolds. Can't stop thinking about our last meeting. Dinner soon. My heart skipped a beat. I quickly hid the phone under my napkin, but not before Jake's sharp eyes caught the action. Everything okay? He asked, his eyebrows knitting together. Work stuff. I replied too quickly, plastering a fake smile on my face. The following weeks were a blur of late nights at the office and hushed phone calls I thought Jake didn't notice. But he did. His casual inquiries about my work hours and who I was talking to became more frequent. I brushed them off, saying it was just the stress of the new project I was working on. Then came the promotion. It felt like a victory, but Jake's reaction was lukewarm. Isn't Reynolds your boss? Seems like he's favoring you a bit too much, he remarked one night, his tone laced with suspicion. I laughed it off, telling him he was imagining things. But the truth was, my relationship with Mr. Reynolds had crossed professional boundaries. I was walking on a tightrope, balancing my marriage and this exhilarating but dangerous liaison with my boss. One night, I told Jake I had to work late again. I left in a hurry, not noticing him following me from a distance. I met Mr. Reynolds at a discreet downtown bar, our usual spot for clandestine meetings. We talked, laughed, and he touched my hand across the table. I was so caught up in the moment that I didn't see Jake standing outside, watching us through the window. When I got home, Jake confronted me. So, working late, huh? The hurt in his voice was unmistakable. I stood there, frozen, words failing me for the first time. The reality of what I was risking hit me hard. But it was too late. The trust between us was shattered, like a glass dropped on a hard floor. Jake had seen enough, and so had I. The realization of my betrayal, the love I was jeopardizing, all came crashing down on me. But the worst part? I wasn't sure if I was ready to give up the thrill of the forbidden for the comfort of the familiar. Business trip to Atlanta, I lied smoothly, avoiding Jake's gaze. He nodded, distracted by the morning news. I felt a pang of guilt but brushed it aside. This weekend with Mr. Reynolds was something I convinced myself I deserved. A break from the mundane, a step into a world where I felt wanted, alive. The getaway was a blur of luxury and forbidden romance. Mr. Reynolds made me feel like I was the center of his universe. But every stolen moment was shadowed by the reality I was leaving behind. Returning home, I found Jake waiting up. His eyes, usually so warm, were cold and probing. "How was the trip?" he asked, his voice edged with suspicion. "Fine. Just the usual meetings," I replied, my voice a little too high-pitched. But Jake wasn't buying it. "Are you seeing someone else?" he asked directly, his eyes searching mine for the truth. I felt cornered, trapped. "That's ridiculous, Jake. I'm just really busy with work," I countered, my voice steady but my heart racing. Days passed, and the distance between us grew. I spent more time at work, more nights away. Home felt like a battleground, each conversation with Jake a delicate dance around the truth. Then, one day, he found it. The receipt from the hotel. I'd been careless, leaving it in my purse. When I came home, he was sitting at the kitchen table, the damning piece of paper in front of him. "Is there anything you want to tell me?" he asked, his voice eerily calm. I looked at him, then at the receipt, and knew my web of lies had unraveled. But I wasn't ready to confess. "Not yet." "It's not what you think," I said, but even to my ears, it sounded weak. The air between us was thick with unspoken words and broken trust. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I told Jake I needed space, time to think. "Maybe we should separate for a while," I suggested, my voice barely a whisper. His reaction was one of resigned sadness, not anger or surprise. He just nodded, and in that moment, I felt like I'd lost something precious. But the thrill of the affair, the allure of being desired, was a siren song I couldn't resist. As I packed a bag with my essentials, I glanced back at the life I was leaving behind, a life of comfort, stability, and love. A life with Jake. But the path I was choosing was different, uncertain, and dangerously exciting. And as I closed the door behind me, I couldn't help but wonder if I was making the biggest mistake of my life. New beginnings, I captioned the photo of the sleek downtown apartment I now shared with Mr. Reynolds. It felt thrilling yet surreal. This new chapter of my life, splashed across social media for all to see. The likes and comments poured in, a mix of surprise, envy, and thinly veiled judgment. Jake found out, of course. He must have seen the post or heard through our intertwined network of friends. One evening, he showed up unannounced, standing at my new doorstep, a mix of hope and despair in his eyes. "I miss you," he said simply, his voice cracking. "Please, let's try to work this out." I stood there, torn. Here was the man I'd shared my life with, offering forgiveness, yet I was drawn to this new, exhilarating life with Mr. Reynolds. "I can't, Jake, I'm sorry," I whispered, closing the door on my past, on a love that had turned into a memory. Life with Mr. Reynolds was a whirlwind of luxury and travel. He promised me the world, and it seemed he was more than capable of delivering it. We jetted off to exotic locations, dined at the finest restaurants, and I was showered with gifts and attention. I documented it all on social media, a showcase of my glamorous new life. But as I scrolled through my feed, flaunting this seemingly perfect world, I couldn't ignore the whispers and stares, both online and in real life. Friends began to distance themselves, their messages becoming less frequent, their tones changing from warm to formal. I was becoming a topic of gossip, my choices a subject of debate. Meanwhile, Jake's absence from my life grew more pronounced. I heard through mutual friends that he was struggling, that my leaving had hit him hard. He was falling into a depression, they said, feeling abandoned and betrayed. Guilt gnawed at me, but I pushed it aside, telling myself I deserved happiness, no matter the cost. Yet, in the quiet moments, away from the glitz and glamour, I couldn't help but reflect on what I'd left behind. There was a simplicity and honesty in my life with Jake that no amount of luxury could replace. But the allure of this new lifestyle, the intoxication of being desired and pampered, was a powerful drug, and I was fully addicted. As I posted another photo of a lavish dinner or a stunning sunset view from a beach resort, part of me wondered if the shine of this new life would ever wear off. If beneath the surface of these perfect images, I would find true contentment or just a hollow echo of what I once had. The more I flaunted this life, the more I felt the weight of the choices I'd made, and the more I wondered if happiness was truly found in the arms of luxury, or in the warmth of a love I had so carelessly left behind. "Have you heard about her?" That's what they whispered now when I walked by. The rumors about my affair with Mr. Reynolds had spread like wildfire, tainting my reputation. Where once I was greeted with smiles, now there were only hushed tones and judgmental glares. I told myself it didn't matter, that my happiness was all that was important. But deep down, each whisper felt like a stab at my dignity. Then, the divorce papers arrived. I wasn't surprised, but the finality of it hit me hard. Jake's signature at the bottom was a quiet surrender, a closing of a chapter that had once been filled with love and promise. I signed them too, telling myself this was for the best, but my heart felt heavy, burdened with the weight of what I had lost. Life with Mr. Reynolds started to change. The man who once wooed me with gifts and sweet nothings began to reveal a controlling side. He dictated what I wore, who I saw, even what I posted on social media. The freedom I thought I had gained by leaving Jake slowly morphed into a gilded cage. Meanwhile, I heard through the grapevine that Jake was doing better. He was focusing on himself, his career. Friends said he seemed happier, more at peace. Hearing this should have brought me some relief, but instead, it deepened the ache of regret. He was moving on, rebuilding his life, while mine felt like it was starting to crumble. The final blow came unexpectedly. I stumbled upon a conversation between Mr. Reynolds and a colleague, a young, ambitious woman from the office. Their flirtatious banter, hidden behind closed doors, was a mirror of how we had once been. The realization that he was cheating on me, just as I had done to Jake, was a cruel twist of fate. I confronted him, my voice shaking with anger and betrayal, but he just shrugged it off, telling me I was being paranoid, overreacting. The irony of it wasn't lost on me. I had been on the other side of this conversation, telling Jake the same lies, weaving the same web of deceit. The apartment that once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a prison. The luxury and excitement that had lured me away from my marriage now seemed hollow, tainted by lies and infidelity. As I lay in bed that night, the reality of my situation settled in. I had left a man who loved me for a fantasy, and now that fantasy was crumbling, leaving me alone, with a tarnished reputation and a heart full of regret. The choices I had made, driven by a selfish pursuit of happiness, had led me to this point. A point where I was neither happy nor at peace. I realized too late that the grass wasn't always greener on the other side, and sometimes, by the time you see the truth, it's already too late. Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying the video so far. If you do, please take a moment to hit that like button, it really helps me out and lets me know you appreciate the content. Also, if you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel. Subscribing is a great way to stay updated with all the latest videos and to be part of our growing community. It's quick, it's free, and it ensures you won't miss out on any upcoming content. So go ahead, smash that like button and hit subscribe. Your support means a lot and keeps this channel going. Thanks for watching. I'm not blind, Robert. I yelled, my voice echoing off the walls of his sleek office. I know about you and her. My boss, Robert Reynolds, stood there, his expression cold, unfazed by my outburst. He tried to dismiss it, but I wouldn't let it go. The argument escalated, our words sharp and cutting. In a fit of anger, he fired me. Professional differences, he said, but we both knew it was personal. I walked out of that office, my head spinning. I had lost my job, my dignity, and myself. Desperate and alone, I went to the only person I thought might still care. I stood outside Jake's door, rehearsing my apology. But when he opened the door, the look in his eyes stopped me. It wasn't anger or sadness. It was indifference. I can't, Laura, he said simply, before closing the door. I stood there, a rejected woman, my pleas for forgiveness left unspoken. The friends I once had started distancing themselves. Invitations dried up, calls went unanswered. The few who did talk to me made their disapproval clear. You made your bed, they said. The social circle I had once been a part of now shut me out, their judgment clear in their averted eyes. Meanwhile, I heard about Jake's success. He had received a prestigious award at work, his career reaching new heights. The news should have been a source of joy, but for me, it was a painful reminder of what I had lost. I scrolled through his social media, his smile bright and confident, surrounded by colleagues and friends. He was thriving, moving on from the wreckage I had left behind. I realized then how much he had grown, how far he had come from the man I had left. Sitting alone in my small, rented apartment, the walls seemed to close in on me. The contrast between my life and Jake's was stark. He had found strength and success in the aftermath of our broken marriage, while I was left grappling with the consequences of my choices. The realization that I had been the architect of my own downfall was a bitter pill to swallow. My affair, my lies, my betrayal had led me here to a place of loneliness and regret. I had sacrificed a life built on love and trust for a fleeting thrill, and now I was paying the price. As I lay in bed that night, the silence overwhelming, I couldn't escape the truth. I had made a series of choices that had led me to this moment. Choices that had cost me my marriage, my friends, and my self-respect. And as I drifted off to sleep, a single thought haunted me: had it all been worth it? The silence of the empty apartment echoed my despair. I'd been job hunting for weeks, but every door seemed to slam shut in my face. My tarnished reputation had preceded me. Whispers of my affair and the scandal at my previous job made sure of that. I was struggling to make ends meet, my savings dwindling with each passing day. Meanwhile, Jake, my ex-husband, was moving on. Through the grapevine, I heard he was dating again. Her name was Emily, a colleague from his office, known for her kindness and intelligence. They were a stark contrast to the turbulent and secretive relationship I had with Mr. Reynolds. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of jealousy, imagining Jake finding happiness with someone else. As my financial woes deepened, the inevitable happened. A notice of eviction was slipped under my door. I had fallen too far behind on rent. Staring at the cold, official letter, reality hit me hard. I was about to lose my home. Around the same time, Jake made a grand gesture, proposing to Emily in a romantic, elaborate setup. Pictures of the proposal flooded social media: a beautiful sunset, a violinist, rose petals. It was straight out of a fairy tale. It was a painful reminder of what I had lost, of the life I could have had if I hadn't been so reckless. In a moment of weakness and overwhelming jealousy, I concocted a plan to sabotage their relationship. I reached out to Emily under the guise of offering my congratulations, but with the hidden agenda of sowing seeds of doubt about Jake's character. It was a desperate, spiteful move, driven by a mix of regret and bitterness. I met her for coffee, spinning tales of Jake's supposed faults and past mistakes. I watched her face for signs of doubt, but Emily's response was not what I expected. She listened patiently, then gently told me, "I understand you're hurt, but Jake has been nothing but honest and supportive. I think it's time you move on and find your happiness, just as he has." Her words were a wake-up call. I had become someone I didn't recognize, vindictive, petty, and consumed by jealousy. As I walked back to my soon-to-be-lost apartment, I realized how far I had fallen. I had tried to destroy someone else's happiness out of spite, and it had only highlighted my own misery and loneliness. Sitting amidst packed boxes, the remnants of my failed attempt at sabotage weighing heavily on me, I understood that my actions were driven by a refusal to face the consequences of my choices. Jake had moved on, building a new life with someone who respected and supported him, while I was stuck in a cycle of regret and self-pity. It was time to take responsibility for my life, to stop blaming others for my downfall. I had to find a way to rebuild, to start anew, even if it meant facing a future full of uncertainties. The road ahead would be difficult, but it was necessary. I had lost much, but I still had the chance to reclaim my integrity and build a life, not on the ruins of what I had destroyed, but on the lessons I had learned. In a small town where everyone knows everyone, my actions at the cafe with Emily didn't just ripple, they caused a tidal wave. Within hours, the confrontation between Jake, Emily, and me was the talk of the town. I could feel the weight of every judgmental stare and hushed whisper as I walked down the street. My attempt to sabotage Jake's relationship had backfired, turning me into the villain of the town's latest drama. The news of their marriage soon followed. Pictures of their wedding flooded social media. A beautiful outdoor ceremony, her in a stunning white dress, him looking happier than I'd ever seen him. It was a stark contrast to the mess I'd made of my own life. The sight of their joy was a painful reminder of the love I once had and lost through my own folly. Amidst this personal turmoil, fate seemed to twist the knife further. I got into a car accident, a moment of distraction turning catastrophic. My luxury car, one of the last symbols of the life I thought I wanted, was totaled. Standing there, amidst the twisted metal, I realized how far I'd fallen. From a woman envied for her seemingly perfect life to someone pitied and whispered about. Meanwhile, Jake and Emily embarked on their dream honeymoon. Pictures of them exploring exotic locations, their smiles wide and genuine, filled my social media feed. The stark difference between our lives was like a cold slap. Here I was, dealing with the aftermath of a car crash, both literal and metaphorical, while they were basking in the glow of newlywed bliss. The whispers around town grew louder. I was the subject of pitying glances and disapproving shakes of the head. The once admired woman who had it all was now a cautionary tale. The gossip wasn't just about the affair anymore, it was about how I had spiraled downward since. I tried to keep my head high, to ignore the murmurs and stares, but each one felt like a tiny cut, slowly draining my resolve. I was a pariah in my own town, a ghost of the person I used to be. As I scrolled through Jake and Emily's honeymoon photos, a realization dawned on me. Their happiness was a result of choices made with love and respect, while my misery was born from decisions driven by selfishness and recklessness. They had built something beautiful together, something I had once had the chance to have but threw away. Sitting alone in my sparse apartment, the reality of my situation hit me hard. I had lost more than a husband and a luxury car. I had lost myself, my dignity, and the respect of those around me. The road to redemption, if there was one, seemed long and uncertain. But as I looked at the mess I'd made of my life, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep going down this path. It was time to face my mistakes, to rebuild my life from the rubble of my poor choices. The journey would be hard, but it was necessary. I had to find a way back to the person I once was, to find peace in the aftermath of the storm I had created. Sitting alone in my sparsely furnished apartment, the walls seemed to close in on me. I was destitute, both in wealth and in spirit, a far cry from the life I once boasted about. My reflection in the mirror showed a woman I barely recognize, worn, tired, and filled with regret. Each decision I had made, each step that had led me here, played over in my mind like a broken record. Word of my situation reached Jake, and I half expected, maybe even hoped, he would offer some help. But he didn't. He knew of my struggles, yet chose to stay away. It was a decision I understood but one that stung deeply. It was the final severing of any ties we had, a clear message that I was truly on my own. In a desperate attempt to rebuild some bridges, I reached out to old friends. The same friends who had been at my wedding, who had shared countless laughs and memories with me. But their responses were cold, distant. "You made your bed," one texted back. The rejection was a bitter pill to swallow. I had alienated everyone who once cared about me, and now I was reaping the consequences. As if to twist the knife further, I saw the announcement on social media: Jake and Emily were expecting a child. The picture of them, beaming with joy, was a stark reminder of the life I could have had. A life filled with love, stability, and now, a growing family. I had dreamed of starting a family with Jake, and seeing him do so with someone else was a painful reminder of the future I had thrown away. I sat there, scrolling through their pictures, each one a testament to their happiness. The love and excitement were palpable, even through the screen. And with each photo, the weight of my regret grew heavier. I had sacrificed a man who loved me, a man who was now going to be a father, for a fleeting thrill that had left me with nothing but sorrow. In the quiet of my apartment, I couldn't escape the truth. My actions, driven by selfish desires and reckless decisions, had led me here. I had chosen a path that brought me momentary excitement but lasting pain. And now, as I watched Jake build the life I once dreamt of with him, the reality of what I had lost hit me harder than ever. I was alone, a shadow of the person I once was. The journey ahead seemed daunting. There were no easy fixes, no quick solutions. I had to face the consequences of my actions, learn from my mistakes, and somehow find a way to rebuild my life. It was going to be a long road, but it was one I had to walk, step by painful step, if I ever hoped to find peace and redemption. Life, as they say, goes on. For Jake, it moved in leaps and bounds. Emily gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, and their joy was palpable, even from the distance of my life to theirs. The photos of their little family, cradling the newborn, were a constant on social media, a reminder of the life and love that was flourishing without me. Meanwhile, I found myself working at a local diner, a far cry from the plush office job I once prided myself on. The pay was meager, barely enough to cover my bills, let alone the mounting debts that seemed to grow each day. I served coffee and pie with a forced smile, each order a reminder of the stark contrast between my current reality and my past life of luxury. As if to underscore this contrast, I learned that Jake and his family moved into a new, luxurious home. It was everything we had once dreamed of together, a big, beautiful house in the best part of town. I stumbled upon a picture of it online, a sprawling estate with a manicured lawn, and felt a sharp twinge of something. Envy, regret, loss, it was hard to tell. Around the same time, my past caught up with me. Legal notices started arriving, each one a stark reminder of the debts I had accrued during my time with Mr. Reynolds. The unpaid credit card bills, the loans I had taken out, they all demanded attention I couldn't afford to give. I was drowning in a sea of financial troubles, with no lifeline in sight. Then came the news that felt like a punch to the gut. Jake's child, the little girl I had seen grow from a newborn to a bubbly toddler in pictures, was starting kindergarten. They threw a small party to celebrate, a family event full of laughter and joy. Pictures of the celebration found their way to me, showing a happy family, a united front of love and togetherness. Sitting in my small, cramped apartment, the walls adorned with peeling paint rather than happy family portraits, the reality of my situation hit me hard. Jake had moved on, built a new life, a family, a home, everything we had once dreamed of doing together. And here I was, struggling to make ends meet, dealing with legal issues, and serving pies to strangers to get by. The disparity between our lives was stark and painful. I had traded a future of love and happiness for a fleeting affair that left me with nothing but regrets. As I lay in bed that night, the sounds of the city a dull roar outside my window, I couldn't help but reflect on the choices I had made. How different things might have been if I had chosen differently, if I had valued what I had with Jake, if I had not been blinded by temptation and excitement. But life doesn't afford us the luxury of rewinds or do-overs. The choices we make shape our paths, and sometimes, those paths lead us to places of hardship and regret. As I drifted off to sleep, the images of Jake's happy family life contrasting sharply with the four walls of my lonely existence, I knew one thing for sure. The road to redemption was long, and I was just at the beginning. The diner's clattering dishes and sizzling grills were a stark backdrop to my deteriorating health. Sleepless nights and anxiety-filled days took their toll. I could feel my body rebelling against the stress and the less-than-ideal living conditions of my small, dingy apartment. Every cough felt deeper, every ache more pronounced. I knew I needed to see a doctor, but without insurance, it was just another entry on a long list of unaffordables. In stark contrast, Jake's life was flourishing. He had become a well-respected figure in our community, involved in local charities and events. I would hear about his achievements occasionally, fundraisers he organized, awards he received. His success was a testament to his character, the same character I had once fallen in love with, and then so carelessly discarded. As I lay in my bed, the sparse room spinning slightly around me, I couldn't escape the haunting thoughts of what could have been. My life was filled with regret, a constant reminder of the consequences of my actions. I had betrayed a man who loved me, chased after a mirage of excitement and luxury, and ended up alone and broken. The realization was a bitter pill, each day a reminder of my foolishness. Then came a moment that felt like a cruel twist of fate. I saw a social media post, a reflection of Jake's life now. He was at a park with Emily and their daughter, a picture of happiness. The three of them were laughing, their faces glowing with joy and love. He had moved on, built a life that was once our dream, with someone else. I sat there, staring at the screen, the image burning into my memory. That should have been my life, my family. But instead, I was here, in a cold apartment, my health failing, my spirit broken. It was a stark reminder of everything I had lost due to my choices. In a moment of impulse, driven by a mix of longing and despair, I went to that park. I stood there, hidden behind a tree, watching them. Jake, Emily, and their daughter were playing, oblivious to my presence. The laughter, the happiness, the love, it was all there, just out of reach. As I watched them, a family united and joyful, the full weight of my choices came crashing down on me. I had lost my husband, my health, my friends, and my dignity. I was alone, a mere shadow, watching the life I could have had play out in front of me. Turning away from the happy scene, I walked back to my apartment, each step heavier than the last. The realization that I had lost everything, not to fate or bad luck, but to my own misguided decisions, was a burden I would carry with me always. My story was one of loss and regret, a cautionary tale of what happens when you sacrifice true love for fleeting desires. Alone in my room, the sounds of the city a dull hum outside, I lay down, the image of Jake's happy family etched in my mind. In that moment, I understood the harsh truth, my choices had led me here, and there was no one to blame but myself. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and loneliness, but it was a path I had chosen, a path I now had